No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to talk about office politics.
Okay.
I was approached by a friend, someone who I've never worked with in a professional environment, but we've been close friends for a number of years. And they had just been passed over for a promotion at their job, and they're good at their job. I have no doubt that they know what they're doing. And they were kind of venting to me a little bit that the person who got the role was someone who the hiring manager had worked with in a previous life, at a previous organization or in a previous role. I forget the specifics, but it was someone, there was a relationship there between the hiring manager and the person who got the role. And my friend was a little incensed by this and said, I was qualified for this role. Why did this person get this role? Well, obviously it was, the word that he used was nepotism, and which is incorrect because it wasn't a family member, but he was implying that the person who got the role got it because of that relationship. And my immediate response was, well, yeah, and he looked at me like, why am I not taking his side? And it got me thinking about the role that relationships play in these decisions and how they can impact people and how they're supposed to impact people or how they're not supposed to impact people. And I'm wondering, have you ever gotten passed over for a promotion to somebody else who had a relationship in that you didn't have? And how did it make you feel if that was the case?
Yeah, I think the reality is that those relationships happen everywhere, in every company, on every team, in every industry, all the time, whether you like it or not. And sometimes it can work to your advantage, and sometimes it works to somebody else's advantage. So there's definitely been times when I have been up for a job and I felt that I was maybe just as good as that person. I put in just as much work as that person. I was just as capable as that person, but that person got the job and I didn't, right? And it's really easy to try to connect the dots of like, well, I guess if I think about it, that person knows this person, or they did this before, or they knew that. Like, that's the natural, I think, human reaction to it, is that there must be a reason where this is like unfair, or there must be a reason that as a result of a relationship or, a reporting structure or a history that they got the job over me. And the reality is that that's probably true 99% of the time. It's probably not what you think it is, which is, well, they must like them more. And it probably is something like they've worked with them longer, have seen them in similar situations, have already experienced what they will do when times are tough and things like that. I think one of the shows you brought up was the Warren Buffett thing.
Sure.
Where you said he gives the biggest, most important accounts to people that have made mistakes before, because he knows that they went to make them right as a result, where somebody new, he doesn't have that history with them, right? So
Yes.
you could say that's favoritism. You could say that that's politics. But the reality is that's just a decision made based on some type of previous experience with somebody for one way or another. And many times, as we talked about on our show, when all of the talent is really good at skill or experience or capability, it becomes the small things that you have to consider when making some of these types of decisions. So yeah, of course, I'm human. I felt a certain way about it. I wanted to blame it on something else, but the reality is that in my own career as well, I'm sure that I have also been the person who has gotten the benefit of previous relationships or dynamics or quote unquote politics for opportunities that I've gotten as a result of people who can trust me or know my body of work.
Right. I agree with that. I think that I want to make a distinction here, because I think that there can be an assumption by some people that if they didn't get the job and the person who did has a relationship with the hiring manager or the boss or whomever, that it means the person who got the job was also less qualified for the job and still got it anyway. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. There are people who get promoted into roles who are not qualified to be in those roles because of who they know all the time. It's really unfortunate when that happens. Hopefully, on a long enough timeline, the universe kind of sorts itself out that way, and the people who are in those roles that are over their head, it will become obvious they're over their head, and then they get moved out, at least in the private sector. But what I'm talking about is, I think we have this kind of natural assumption that we are the most qualified person for a job. We're in our own head. We haven't looked at the body of work that the other applicants can provide or have provided. We weren't in the room when they interviewed, probably. We may know them personally. We may have worked with them in the past, but we're talking about small snippets versus a complete picture that someone else may know. And so my friend who had this conversation with was probably approaching this from the standpoint of believing he was the most qualified person for the role. And honestly, maybe he was, but maybe someone else was equally qualified. Maybe the person who got the job was just a little bit less qualified on paper than he was, but still qualified enough to do the job. Still brought all the skill sets and all of the resume that the job required. They checked all the boxes, and maybe they didn't check them as well, but that relationship is a very powerful force, because a relationship means influence. And if you have a I would love to hire people that I already knew, because it's less of a gamble. If I hire somebody that I know is terrible and I put them in the role anyway, then I'm just, shooting myself in the foot. But if I have a group of candidates that I think are equally qualified for a role, and one of them I have a relationship with, and I know how they're going to react in certain situations, I know that I can influence them. I know that they respect me and that they will listen to me, as opposed to thinking that they have all the answers coming in. Those things make a difference. And if a person can make a decision with that in mind, I don't know that that's necessarily good or bad. It's just human nature, and it is what it is. So I've kind of found myself in this situation where I have a hard time feeling empathetic for a person who doesn't get the job in those situations, unless there's just real strong evidence that the person who did get it just wasn't able to do the job.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And as you were talking through that, I was thinking about the fact that, even when hiring somebody, and I use this example with people that already work for an organization, and maybe they're applying for a job where there are external candidates that are also being considered. And it's kind of like, well, here's the deal. If I'm talking to somebody who is an external candidate, doesn't work here, the reality is I kind of have to just believe them. Like, right. I have to take them at their word. And so I listen to what they say, and then I have to work through questions that are either going to validate what I believe is the work that they're saying that they're doing, or I'm going to be able to sniff out where maybe they're trying to BS me and they're really good at interviewing, right? I have to spend this entire time really trying to navigate whether or not I believe them and their work. Now, there's things that I can do. Maybe I know somebody who knows them, or maybe I've, been in their place of business or whatever. But the reality is that's what I have to do. When you're an internal candidate, you have a full-on advantage, because every day is your interview. Every day you have the opportunity to grow that relationship. Every day you have the potential to live up to your potential and do great work. So that is also, to your point, like, that is kind of politics. That is relationships. That is the fact that if I'm going to take a risk somewhere, or maybe promote somebody that is maybe still working or they're not there yet, most of the time I'm going to put my money on the people that I know. I'm going to bank on the fact that even if I know somebody's not ready yet, I'm aware of their body of work. I know they will work hard. I know they will take feedback. I know that they will, really focus in on the work. I'm willing to do that more often than taking a risk on somebody that I don't know. So even though those are the extremes of I know you well enough because I work with you versus I don't know you at all, I think that same thing plays out if I know people, we all work together, but maybe there's a different style of relationship or different history, or I've seen people that I've known the same amount of time do work differently in different situations, which then allows me to understand how that might show up in whatever the next job is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think companies in general would rather promote from within than hire from the outside, almost always. Internal candidates typically, let's be honest, they make less money. You can pay people less money if you promote them from within versus hiring from the outside. And to your point, you aren't taking a risk as much. You know that person, or you at least know somebody who knows that person, and you can find out if they're BSing you in the interview or not. Whereas an external candidate, you can't as easily. And so I think companies would absolutely rather hire internally. And so when we see an internal candidate get a role over an external candidate, I think we're less likely to kind of think, oh, that's the playing favorites. We kind of assume that's just how the world works. When we get passed over for a role in favor of somebody else that has the relationship, either we're both internal candidates, or maybe the person who got the role is an external candidate who has a relationship with a hiring manager because they worked together in a previous company. There's the old adage that says that, when you hire a new leader and like a high level leader, oh, give it 6 months and all the people in the roles are going to lose their job because that new leader is going to bring in all their old people. And hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully that person sees what the talent is that they have inherited before they start just axing people and bringing their own people in. But if you look at what's behind that method or why people do that, it's because they value the relationship. It's a lazy way of leading if you just do it off the bat instead of seeing what is there for you to work with. But if you have decided that a person you inherited is not doing their job well and you've made attempts and they have to go away, if you bring in a person from your old organization into the new organization because you have a relationship with them, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing.
No, I agree. And I've been on both sides of the coin, right? I've been in situations where leaders have been brought in externally for jobs that I've applied for. And upon them coming in, I've seen it both ways. I've seen them come in and say, wow, I can totally get it. I see it. I might not like it. I may feel like, well, I should have got that job. But when I meet them and I see them and I see how they do work, I say, okay, I get it. Like I can see that there is a level of experience here that we need, and they bring this to the table. And at the same time, I've seen those that come in and I'm like, what is going on here? Right? Like if I lost out to that person, maybe I'm not that good, right? like am I just like hyping myself up? But the reality is, and many times we want to stay focused on those failures, right?
Right.
When the reality is that there's a lot more successes most of the time in those situations. And as a leader, I've had to be that decision maker. I've had to make those decisions to say, we've had a good amount of internal promotions. We've had a good amount of people that we got a balance where we've taken some risk of our internal people that maybe they're not ready yet, but we want to give them an opportunity. We may need a skill set that we kind of sort of have, but we need more of. There's a lot of reasons that you need to make a decision to go internal and external and have some good amount of balance. So, and I understand that. And when I've had to make those decisions, one of the things that I try to do as a leader is be really transparent with that person coming into the organization and letting them know that. Say, hey, I need you to know that there are many people, my people, that wanted this job, worked hard for this job, and are continuing to work hard for this job. And the reality is, you took that job. I'm telling you this because I believe in you. I think that you bring in a great amount of experience and background. I'm expecting you to show up as a leader, but I'm also expecting you to understand those dynamics. And to do your absolute best to make sure that you're not stirring that pot up and that you're not walking in ignorantly thinking that everybody will just welcome you with open arms. I hope they will. But I think that level of dialogue is necessary to try to calm some of that, at least at the very beginning, to at least allow that person to have a chance to show what they're capable of and what they can bring to the team.
I love that. And I love that it almost brings this conversation full circle, because that external candidate now is coming in. And now, what are they going to have to deal with? They're going to have to deal with office politics. The politics of, are they going to be accepted as a leader? Are they going to be able to build relationships with these people who wanted their role but didn't get it, or not? And oftentimes, the first 30 or 60 days, they're going to be working from a deficit. There's going to be a natural inclination to approach that new person with a cold shoulder or with a standoff nature. Now, you can't tolerate disrespect, and you can't tolerate, violating, the company policy or whatnot. But I can understand a person who didn't get a role in favor of somebody else not necessarily wrapping their arms around that person, going, "Oh, you're obviously better than me. Let's run into the rainbow together." This isn't about that. It's about making sure that the person's I don't want to diminish it to as little as saying it's about their feelings, but it honestly is. It's about how good do they feel about this outcome, and whether or not they feel good about it 30, 60, 90 days after the decision can make a difference between that person being the next one promoted or leaving the organization completely disengaged. How that interaction, how that transition occurs has a ripple effect that can impact your entire team. So if you're the hiring manager and you're making these decisions, obviously, you can't just look at who the best person for the job is. Obviously, that's what you should do. But once you've made the decision, your job doesn't end there. Your job continues in a different form, which is to make sure that the ripple effect from this decision is a net positive on your team and on your organization as opposed to a net negative.
Yep, I completely agree. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
Okay, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, this is going to go off of the first thing that Lorenzo said in the episode was that every day is your interview. You need to think about that as absolute fact. Not just every day, but every conversation and every interaction you have with every person who you work with. The job that you might get 10 years from now, the one that moves your career to the next level, your first interview for that job 10 years from now might be today. It might be today in the hallway with a person who you stop and make a connection with and develop a relationship with, and then several years down the road, you're the person who has the relationship who can take advantage of that relationship to land themselves that job. So instead of going into this process thinking that it's all about how you can do the job well and all about your skills, those are important. Hone your skills, get better at your job, do your job well, but stop entering these interviews and these processes thinking that that's all that matters. Relationships matter, every day matters, every conversation matters, and the quicker you can realize that, the more you'll start to look at every single day and every single conversation as an interview for your future job.
I think it's a great 1 minute hack, and I think it's what we started talking about. It's like these politics and these relationships exist everywhere at all levels in different ways. And so like thinking that they shouldn't doesn't do you any good. Accepting that they're there is absolutely critical to what you just mentioned, which is the idea of if you think of every day as your interview, if you think of every interaction as a means to build a relationship and leave a legacy and really be able to lead with your best foot forward and let people know who you're all about, I think that pays back tenfold within your career when people think about how you were, how you talked to them, how you built a relationship with them when the decision didn't matter, right? It's so much more important. It's why I appreciate people that put their head down and do great work all the time and have to pick up their head and say, oh, by the way, did you know that we're hiring for that job that you've wanted to do for a really long time? Because they're so busy just doing their job great and helping others that they're not even thinking about that opportunity. What drives me crazy is when a job opens and now all of a sudden somebody wants to talk to me about why they deserve it and what work they're going to do to get it. Every day is your interview. If you think about it that way and if you build those relationships, I think it pays off in the long run big time.
Yeah, it will do you no good to hate the game. Instead, learn the rules of the game and play it well.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.